Hey everybody, James Groman here. Breaking in my new GoPro that my wife bought me. We're going to try to start videoing some of these sculptures that I'm working on for Mondo. As everyone knows by now, I'm working on a Man-Thing figure for them. So I thought I'd kind of take you through a little bit of my process of how I go about putting together an armature or even the planning stages to get ready to sculpt. You can see a lot of stuff's laid out here. My studio is kind of a mess right now. Things all over the place. I have a sculpture up on the stand that is top secret. No one's allowed to see, but I had to set up a separate workstation to kind of get this armature together and stuff. So let me try to talk you through some of my the steps I go through when I'm doing a sculpture. Starting with these guys right here. What I usually do is, of course, some somewhat detailed concept sketches of whatever character I'm taking on. This, of course, being the front and back view of the Man-Thing. A lot of my sketches aren't even this detailed. Sometimes it's pretty much just laying out the basic shapes and the basic structure, the basic anatomy. And a lot of the concept work is actually done in the sculpture stage. So this one, being a fan of the character and really never really taking a serious stab at designing him, I thought I'd go into a little bit more detail just to kind of make it more clear in my own head. That's not to say that as the sculpture progresses that I won't maybe try some things that are not in the sketches, because just, you know, sometimes it's great to continue the concepts stage even into the sculpture. So this is my sketch. It's printed out to size. I mount them on these boards, mostly because it gives me a better sense of scale and mass. Here's the armature itself, which sometimes these things can come out looking like a piece of art themselves. And this guy got a little bit more elaborate than I really intended. It may look kind of messy to some of you guys, but to me, I love looking at them in this stage because hopefully if I've done all my homework and measured everything correctly, that as I start to build over the top of it, I'm going to end up with this guy right here. But printing these out and putting them on a board like this allows me the ability to kind of come in and measure things off as I'm sculpting. You know, I can just kind of lay this guy right up against this, see how everything lines up. You can see these shoulders are going to have to be built out a lot here to kind of make that silhouette work. So you can see that this gets me part of the way there. Some of the masses are like larger, where I've kind of built out the chest, even the spine, you can see. And I've got a real quick sketch that I did of a side view so I can get a little bit more. Sometimes you're kind of surprised by the size of a sculpture once you plan it out front back, but have not really considered what it looks like from profile. That once you start sculpting, you go, wow, this thing's really pretty massive. And you're starting to see that here with the Man-Thing. You can see how I built up that spinal column that kind of curves over the top of his body. Side view of the head gives me a little bit better idea of how the head's going to protrude from the body, what kind of length I have to have on that neck. So yeah, these things just solve a lot of problems for me, and it gives me something to kind of line up my sculpture against as I'm working on it. So I think it's invaluable to have this reference done like this through the whole process. Kind of like checking yourself as you go. Now, the armature itself, let me get this stuff out of the way here. You can see some of the stuff that I have here laid out on my table. That these are all different materials and tools that I use when I'm putting the armature together. There's epoxy sculpt, which is, you can see here, it's a two-part mix epoxy clay that you can actually, it takes about 8 hours to properly set up, which gives you a lot of working time, which is what I really like. And I use that to actually join a lot of my joints and armature together in spots. You can see that stuff, it hardens like stone. It is really sturdy, which is really important when you're doing an armature. That I've actually worked on sculptures where the armature starts to break down as I'm working on it. And that is always a problem, because then sometimes you have to tear your sculpture apart, go back and repair your armature after the fact. It hasn't happened to me in a long time because I learned my lesson. So, but this guy, I think he's ready to go. I'm really happy with how all these joints work. I've been talking to people about this process I'm starting to use. I used to use it back in the day, and sometimes I get in a hurry when I'm building my armatures, and I'm trying to slow myself down, because this is very, very helpful to be able to take your armature apart and put it back together, especially when you're looking at having photographs done of your sculpture so you can have a licensor's approval, because that's really important. Is I can go all day long doing whatever I want with this sculpture of Man-Thing, but ultimately Marvel will have to look at it and approve it. So they're going to want to see it all together, not in pieces, parts. So that's why I think this process has worked out really well. You can see that this is a basic, these square cylinders that actually will plug into each other like a sleeve. It gives me the ability to kind of take this arm off, sculpt all the way around it wherever I need to get the detail right. A lot of times when I'm cutting my wire for my arms or my legs, even these tentacles, you can see the tentacles that hang off of Man-Thing's head. I usually cut them slightly longer than they need to be, so there's a margin of error there, or if I decide I need to snip a little bit off, then I can. If I cut them too short and then build my armature, then I'm in trouble. So I never really trust my measuring that much, that I don't leave myself a little leeway. You can see, even with his head, that these tentacles are cut a little bit longer than they really need to be, knowing that I may want to curl one up. I want to have these kind of imperfections all through there where they don't hang straight, totally perfectly straight down. So it gives me some wiggle room that I haven't painted myself in a corner and have to rebuild the skull. You can see the skull's kind of goofy looking. With my ball bearings that I use for eyes, gets a perfect circle in there. I have ball bearings of all different sizes for whatever sculpts I'm using. And then you can see different gauge wires that I use to the thicker gauge. I'm trying to think of the numbers here, but the thicker gauge for the main body. I have a big block of wood in there that forms the torso. The other reason I use these blocks of wood now is because I have an armature stand that I'll have to show you at some point. The armature stand actually has a pole or rod that sticks out, and that rod will go right into the back. And what it does is it offers some stability while I'm sculpting, so this guy doesn't shake around too much, doesn't fall over if I bump the table or something like that. And that's another thing that I have not used in a long time. I usually rely on my sculptures to stand on their own, but I know these sculpture stands are pretty invaluable at this point, especially it holds the armature strong enough that I could take the legs off and this guy's still going to stand at attention. So I'll still be able to look at it while I'm working on a leg, slide the leg right back on. So that's pretty cool. Another thing that I will probably do is once you've gotten, like this is one of his arms, you can see once again, his fingers are a little bit longer than they need to be, but I'll fix that later. Once I get the armature and basic shape of the arm, I will probably still go in with another bit of wire